Hello chess friends and welcome to your chess channel and welcome to a very special video that I decided to create today. It's a video in order to honor the legendary life of the legendary Bobby Fischer, and I wanted to also thank my follower Sahil. He pointed me out that it would have been Bobby Fischer's 78th birthday today. Thank you, Sahil. Of course, we are going to cover one game played by the legendary Bobby. We're trying to bring him at least for a moment back into our lives, and today's game will be the legendary game from the 1963 US Chess Championship, in which Bobby Fischer crushed them all. He had a perfect score, 11 wins, no draws, no losses. It was such a great perfection. I already covered one game between Bobby Fischer and Robert Byrne, but this game was really incredible. It will show the attacking skills by Bobby Fischer, and it will show also his great positional understanding when it comes to symmetrical positions, in which basically it's not so easy to find good attacking opportunities. So let's check out now the game. I think this game has been covered many times on many YouTube chess channels, but still I wanted to also present you some of my ideas of this game. I hope you don't mind. Maybe you have seen already this game, but as I said, it's simply a video in order to honor the life of the legendary Bobby. So here, d4 played by Robert Eugene Byrne. We have knight to f6 by Bobby. We have c4, g6, we have g3, the Carlsbad fianchetto setup. The idea of white is simply to play bishop to g2, knight to c3, and maybe, if the position allows it, even to push the pawn on e4. That's not easy in this Carlsbad setups, but as I said, maybe as a long-term plan it could work. We're trying to get a central pawn breakthrough motif. Here in the game, c6 played by Bobby Fischer, and actually it's a pragmatic idea. It's already sort of a line that could equalize the position in a very early stage for white. We're trying to play the move d5, and then the pawn structure is really firm in the center. So here, bishop to g2. Robert Eugene Byrne didn't compete now for the d5 square with the move knight to c3, or for the e4 square. After the move bishop to g2, we have now the move d5 immediately. We have c takes d5, and now c takes d5 also by Bobby Fischer. So what we can notice now, the pawn structure is symmetrical, and whenever you see these types of positions, it's all about piece activity. So who has the better pieces on the board? The pieces have to be improved through the whole game. I think we'll probably win the game. So the problem is now, if you try some pawn moves, for instance, even if you manage to push the pawn on e4 somehow from white perspective, if you get a e4 breakthrough, then you're risking to be left with an isolated pawn on d4. The same thing for black. If black pushes the pawn, for instance, on e5, then of course you could risk an isolated pawn on d5. And if you try maybe some expansions, let's also imagine like a3, b4, for instance, from white's perspective, then you risk always to have a weak square position. For instance, you could have a weak c4 square, then maybe a knight could come on that square, maybe not something like this, knight to c4, then for instance, black could have a powerful outpost. So the same thing, of course, from black's perspective. If you push pawns too much, then of course you weaken the pawns, the position on the queen side here. Of course, when we watch the position now on the king side, the main goal for both sides in this symmetrical position, I hope you don't mind if I complicate things a little bit. Here the main goal would be also an outpost here from black's perspective on the square e4, from white's perspective, of course, on the square e5. So these are the main strategical goals. As I said, pawn moves are dangerous moves really in these types of positions, so that's why you have to improve simply your minor piece activity. So here, knight to c3, perfect move. You see, it's the best move for white, bringing the piece on the most natural square. Bishop to g7, also perfectly fine. And now comes already sort of an inaccuracy by Robert Eugene Byrne. e3, okay, you're fixing the pawn structure, but actually you're weakening also here a little bit the light squares on the board. The better idea is, I think, simply to continue with the move knight to f3 without pawn moves. You don't want to play so many pawn moves. As I said, pawn moves are dangerous moves in this structure. So here e3, castling. Here knight from g to e2, and a new inaccuracy, I think, by Byrne. although you have good activities with your knight to f4, but when you don't need to, please don't do that. You don't have to play your knights like this, where both of these knights are taking out good squares for this other knight. So it's a sort of a reloading idea here by white. You see these knights are perfectly fine, they're glued together, but you don't want to, as I said, take away a square for your knight with this other knight. The better idea is maybe to play simply knight to f3 on a more natural square. So, and Bobby Fischer, as I said, we usually don't want to play now the move e5 because we're risking this isolated pawn situation. But with this move, knight from g to e2, actually Robert Eugene Byrne lost a little bit the battle in the center of the board, because this knight is a little bit misplaced. This knight would be probably better on the square f3, and that's actually now so far not a good setup by white. He played the move e3, Byrne played also the move knight to e2, and you see now how Bobby Fischer would simply punish this tiny little inaccuracies in openings. Here, knight to c6. You see, Bobby brings the pieces on the best squares. Knight to c6 and the knight on f6 are simply better than these two knights in this setup. So here, castling, we have now b6. You have to develop, of course, your minor piece further. We have b3 and now bishop to a6. Bishop to b7. Is also possible, but it's not so strong because bishop to a6 is slightly better, because we having at least this diagonal on the board, very important stuff. If you place the bishop on b7, then of course it's blocked out by its own pawn. And okay, so far Bobby has built a very nice formation. Of course, what we need to do is improve simply the rook's activity, maybe something like rook to c8, rook to e8, and try to maneuver the queen from the first rank, getting our rooks connected and finish our development. So here, bishop to a3, Byrne does the same, because there is simply not a good, it's simply not a good idea if you bring the bishop here on b2. Again, you would block out your own bishop by its own pawn. So here, rook to e8. Here, Bobby is preparing the e5 move. As we said, it would be risky to do that, because then you risk this isolated pawn. But as we said, Byrne didn't compete here, I think, in the center enough. It gives now Bobby Fischer opportunities to simply push the pawn on e5 and creating further dynamics. The good thing about Bobby Fischer's setup is that this knight is pinned. So it gives also some trouble here for white to play with this knight on e2. In the game here, queen to d2 played by Byrne, and now comes e5 immediately. We have d takes e5, we have knight to e5, and the problem is, as I said, you cannot take here this pawn. If you try knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop to d5, and you see now we'll simply take out, deflect the queen from the defense of the bishop, and here we'll simply take out the minor piece. So knight to f3 is also here a possibility. You lose simply the queen here with some checks. If you take out, the queen is lost here on the d file. So simply too much going on. You cannot take so far the d5 pawn. As I said, it could be a weakness, this isolated pawn, and here Byrne plays now the main mistake in the game, which is really wild when you think about it more. Rook from a to d1 would be a better idea, because what you need to do is to have a protection of your f2 pawn. And as I said, really incredible that this move was the main mistake by Robert Byrne. Now Bobby Fischer will punish, I think, the third sort of inaccuracy by Byrne. Here, after move rook to d1, Bobby Fischer goes all in. Let's see now the possible continuation after rook from a to d1. Then rook to c8. Here you could take knight takes d5, maybe knight takes d5, and now after bishop to d5, queen to c7. It's an equal game, because still Bobby Fischer has great activities. He can play rook to d8, is down a pawn, but I think the rook's activity on the d and c file is something that bothers now white. Maybe white could go bishop to b2, retreating, and now here Bobby could go queen to c2 and force further simplification of the game. So I think this game would be a draw. But rook from f to d1 gives really, as I said, new attacking opportunities for Bobby. We have knight to d3. Actually, possibility. If you play rook from a to d1, then this move knight to d3 wouldn't work, because here queen to c2 would be a simple possibility, and now black has to retreat knight to c5, and still Bobby Fischer has some worries about this move, about this pawn here on d5. But when the rook is on here, when the rook from f is on d1, now this move knight to d3 is perfectly fine, because white has lost the protection of the f2 square. So here queen to c2, a new mistake by Robert Byrne. He should have simply proceeded with the move knight to d4. One of the best ways to play against isolated pawns, like Bobby Fischer has now in the position, is simply to create a blockade around that square. So knight to d4, still a better position for Bobby, but this is the only move that is helping out Robert Byrne. Here, as I said, queen to c2, and now Bobby Fischer plays really one of the most brilliant sacrifices in chess history. He plays the move knight takes f2. King to f2, you have to take, but now knight to g4. You see how you have to have your pieces on the most active squares. If Bobby would have played like Byrne did, for instance, if you imagine the symmetrical position, if Bobby would have the knight here on e7, then the knight wouldn't be so dangerous. Now the move knight to g4 comes with a check. King to g1. If you try king to e1 to escape, maybe here to maybe the square d2 and trying maybe king to c1, it's not so good. Queen to f6 is coming immediately. Knight to f4 is not a possibility. Here the e pawn is hanging. Again, it comes with a new check, so it's not possible. So that's why king to g1. We have knight to e3, the fork on the queen and the rook, and here queen to d2. Okay, Bobby Fischer could have taken this rook, but actually it's not the point about this rook. If you take out the rook, then rook to d1, still you're continuing the game with an isolated pawn. It's not a good position anymore. White is better here in this particular scenario, although it's probably playable because Bobby has a rook for 2 knights, but still I don't like simply black's position anymore. This pawn will be taken in a couple more moves. Still the king is not so endangered anymore. Byrne can escape from this attacks, and it's not good. So actually after the move queen to d2, Bobby goes for this bishop. It's the most important piece now. It's the most important defensive piece of white. After king to g2, we have now d4, and what you could do is maybe escape to a4, but again it's not so good because simply bishop to b7 will happen. You have to play again king to g1, and now queen to d5 is even forced checkmate. You have to play something like knight to f4 in order to protect your weak g2 square. So that's why here a check could happen, new check here, simply new checks, then queen to f3, again a new check. The king has to move again, queen to g3, it's a new check. If you try to cover, then bishop to h6. That's the main motive of this tactic. You see now in the continuation of the game, this move bishop to h6 is the main tactic. It's a great deflection motif, deflecting the queen from the defense of the second rank. This motif will appeal many times now in the continuation of the game. Bishop to h6, if you try of course to take the bishop, you get checkmated, so you can maybe escape with the queen, but now bishop to e3 will happen and it's game over. Wherever you go, it's simply a lost game. So as I said, knight to a4 is not working here. So in the game here Byrne tried knight to d4, taking out the knight, but now bishop to b7 anyway. Again king to f1. If you try king to g1, bishop to d4 could happen, queen to d4, and now here comes a great deflection motif, rook to e1. After king to f2, we can simply take, queen takes d4, and now we could also take out this rook. It's still playable maybe for white, but as I said, white is down the exchange, has also lost a pawn. Of course Bobby Fischer would win this game for sure, but it's simply a line that I think prolongs the game a little bit, but it's also a bad line. So as I said, king to f1 is even worse because now queen to d7 happened, and in this position Byrne resigned. What's the main issue? Let's see now. If you try king to g1 again to escape, then queen to h3, threatening here some checkmates, because the main motive is again bishop to d4, deflecting the queen from the defense of the king, and then bishop to queen to g2, checkmate. So what you could do maybe is trying to maneuver the knight somewhere, but now again this motif, bishop to h6, and if you try to escape, I don't know, maybe somewhere with the queen, then bishop to e3 anyway, and you can only bring the queen, and you get checkmated here with queen to g2. What you could do maybe is here knight to b5 to protect the knight, but again queen to h3, again with the same motif, nothing dramatically changes here. Again the queen gets deflected and it's game over. Brilliant attack. This stunner knight to f2. As I said here, really beautiful sacrifice with this follow knight to g4, immortal chess game played by the legendary Bobby. And as I said, in this tournament, Bobby Fischer crushed them all. He had a perfect 11 wins. So, okay, thank you again, Sahil, for pointing me out that it would have been actually Bobby Fischer's birthday today. Congratulations, Bobby, again. I hope you're living now on a better place. I hope you can play some chess on your new home. If you want to see more attacking brilliances like this, you can also check out my best chess games of all time series, in which I also covered some other Bobby Fischer games, but also we have some Garry Kasparov, Magnus Carlsen, Vasily Ivanchuk, and really the most beautiful chess games in chess history. And if you maybe more into this engine games, you can also check out my commented chess games played by computer series, in which I covered the best games played by Stockfish, Lila C0, Alpha 0, and so on. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.